This video will be about the reopening ceremony of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, which took place yesterday, an event very significant to the occult. That event is signaling the unfurling of the end-time religion of Rex Deus, as Gary Wayne refers to in his book. They are officially referring to it in the headlines as Notre Dame back from the ashes, like the phoenix. The spire that burned and was replaced was topped with a phoenix, which replaced a rooster that was there before. So it seems the ritual itself is a metaphor for the phoenix or the griffin or the dragon rising from the ashes. And I'll play a little bit of an interview about an article from when that happened several months ago or maybe a year ago.
A major milestone in the restoration of Paris's famed Notre Dame Cathedral. The placement of a gigantic copper rooster. You see it there. A local bishop blessing the rooster, which is replacing the one that crashed through the roof in that devastating fire back in 2019. Then a crane lifted the weather vane to the top of the church's nearly 100-metre high spire that the crews have been rebuilding now. The chief architect called it a phoenix rising from the ashes. Notre Dame is set to reopen for...
The chief architect called it a phoenix rising from the ashes. I do believe that the burning of that spire at Notre Dame was planned. In 2012, in the iPet Goat video, it appears to have predicted the burning of the spire of Notre Dame. And I'm going to play some of that now. And I want you to notice that it is a Gothic cathedral with spires burning and toppling, and the Antichrist character is pictured right next to it. This is occurring at the end of the iPet Goat 2 video that occurs right before the AC exits towards the sun and the pyramids, and that's after Bush, Obama, and the Twin Towers crash in this video. So this would imply that their plans are wrapping up maybe, and I don't know what that means for the return of Jesus, but I pray it means that he comes back soon. Also notice the flames in the AC figure's eyes, and also what is on his forehead. The all-seeing eye with the pyramid at the top with flames coming out like on the US dollar bill. And that will be important later when we talk about the mark of the beast symbolism with the Alpha and Omega and the X. Okay. In the commentary of the reopening ritual of Notre Dame Cathedral, the reporters interviewed a master mason, John David, from York, England, who was involved in a renovation from a different cathedral that caught fire in 1984 and also rose from the ashes. Notice how he talks about the craft and the importance of a disaster to bring the significance of the cathedrals back.
Get towards the opening of the doors, and actually the inspiration as well of a certain master builder, if you will, that many still look towards. We're talking about Eugène Viollet de la Duc, who essentially restructured Notre Dame back in the 1800s. His importance. John David.
Well, it was a wonderful reawakening of the importance of these cathedrals. As somebody mentioned earlier, it sometimes takes a slight disaster to actually do this, but they are there. They're for the people. They're for the religious base, but they are a symbol of the people, the country. They survived. They survived so long. And we should keep them going. And the craft is there as long as the willingness to get the job done.
We should keep it going. The craft is there as long as there's a willingness to get the job done. So yes, I do believe they caused it to burn so that it could be rebuilt by these craftsmen and bring the significance of the cathedrals back. And that significance has to do with the return of the end-time religion. In this video, I'm going to talk about the significance of the cathedrals to the occult, and I will also be talking more about this craft. So they made a huge event out of this with the leaders and heads of state there and some celebrities also. You had Prince William, Macron, Trump, Zelensky, Elon Musk, other princes and kings and dukes of Europe, Africa. Charles was not there, and they didn't mention it, but they did mention the absence of the Pope. Apparently, there was a trilateral meeting between Trump, Macron, and Zelensky, probably discussing the upcoming war ritual. They said that there were 6,000 police, plus military, plus drones. Imagine how much that cost. They said that the restoration costs were funded by donors, over $850 million. The announcers made a big deal about the order of arrival of these heads of state, for some reason having to do with protocol. They were pointing out that Trump was arriving last, and they referred to Trump as the soon-to-be most powerful man on the planet. They pointed out that he was sitting next to Macron, who presided over the event, which was a prominent place for him to sit. The announcers referred to Trump as the Beast. I know that his vehicle, the Black Tahoe, is referred to as the Beast, but they called Trump the Beast. I'm going to play a clip from where they make this referral, which is preceded by another reference to the history of the cathedral.
You shouldn't forget that during the French Revolution, Robespierre, the most radical leader, initiated a cult of the goddess Reason in the cathedral. And then if Victor Hugo wrote his book, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, it was because of the cathedral was falling down, literally.
And they had decapitated a number of statues, a great number of statues,
Yes.
thinking they were previous French royalty, and they were wrong.
Well, actually, no, they were just the kings of the Old Testament.
Yes.
They were the king of Judah and Israel, but they looked like kings. And actually, what was beheaded was not kings, but the royalty.
I'm guessing, given the images we're seeing, what appears to be, well, it's a Peugeot, but the black I saw gave me a sense of a motorcade of maybe seeing the Beast shortly. We are, 10 minutes away from the opening. As Katavan, you mentioned a moment ago, we will soon see President Trump. Are we going to elect Trump, I should say? Are we starting to see his motorcade?
Cars that are too small.
So you heard them refer to Trump as the arrival of the Beast. But before that, the French commentator was talking about the cathedral during the French Revolution, which would have been during the time of Napoleon. He was referencing when the Notre Dame in Paris was desecrated and renamed to the Temple of the Goddess of Reason. The Christian altar was replaced with an altar to liberty, and the inscription to philosophy was carved over the cathedral's doors. Statues of liberty and busts of Enlightenment philosophers replaced the kings of the Old Testament. Wasn't it France that gave us the Statue of Liberty? Trump has stated that he and Alexander the Great and Napoleon were cut from the same cloth. You could say that Alexander the Great is Apollo, since he was the son of Zeus or Satan. Interesting that Trump is associated with Apollo, with all the gold and the Apollo decoration in his 66th floor penthouse in Manhattan. And the references to the beast Apollyon, Apollo, is referred to as a beast in the pit in Revelation. But Trump was not quite the last to arrive and go into the cathedral. The announcers make a big deal to point out that the last person was Elon Musk, otherwise known as Dark Gothic MAGA. Now I'm going to play what the announcers say about this.
Centre next to Emmanuel Macron, and also not quite the last person we've seen going in, or at least up to this stage, is none other than Elon Musk. Bertrand, very interesting last minute arrival.
Yes, very much so. Even he seems to be more a man of the future in a cathedral that symbolize the eternity of the past. But it's definitely against protocol, I might say. Are you surprised that he's arriving last?
He said that Elon is more a man of the future that symbolizes the eternity of the past, and that him arriving last is definitely against protocol. So now I'll talk about Gothic cathedrals in general, which I have covered in other videos. I made a new playlist titled Gothic Cathedrals. I'm going to put this video in it if anyone wants more info than what I will review here. Gothic cathedrals are occult buildings in stone, which is why the language used by the speakers and announcers in this event use occult language. I will go over more examples of that language later. Gothic cathedrals were funded by the Knights Templar. The architecture of Gothic cathedrals are constructed to cause illumination using resonance by design, which I covered in my video titled Resonance. The organ placed underneath the rose window creates a resonance along with the flying buttress architecture. There is ancient sacred knowledge of construction used by the master mason craftsmen, which the announcers also refer to in this ritual. The Gothic cathedrals built by the Templars are constructed in ley lines, which are also known as earth energy lines or dragon lines corresponding to the planets. Cornelius Agrippa, the 15th century occultist, wrote about the planets as they correspond to the 7 ancient earthly oracle sites with high harmonic resonances, which were all Gothic cathedrals. The Order of the Dragon, the Druids, and later the Templars established Gothic cathedrals at these locations as a pilgrimage to enlightenment, which you hear Elon Musk talk about a lot, and it was referred to as the Lactodorum, or the Great North Road, reflected in the Milky Way above, and these were mostly the Gothic cathedrals in France. So the moon was St. James Cathedral in Spain, Mercury, Toulouse Cathedral in France, Venus, Orleans Cathedral in France, the sun, Chartres Cathedral in France, which is also a Notre Dame cathedral, Mars, another Notre Dame cathedral in France, Jupiter was Amiens Notre Dame Cathedral in France, and Saturn was Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. So Jupiter corresponds to Amiens Notre Dame Cathedral in France in Agrippa's account, but this ritual was performed at the Notre Dame in Paris. But regardless, this Notre Dame in Paris is still built on top of the temple of Jupiter, and the announcers in this ritual point that out. Macron is from Amiens, by the way. But I'm going to play where they point this out about it being on top of the Temple of Jupiter. One moment.
Of this jewel of France.
Well, we usually try to tell them that even before Notre Dame was built, that very location was the center of Paris, a temple that pre-existed even the Catholic institution there was found.
So this was a Roman temple to
Yes,
Jupiter?
Exactly. And a pillar from it is now at the Carnavalet Museum in Paris. So it's those very stone, this very piece of land is the beating heart of Paris since even before it was called Paris. And maybe you talked about the self-coronation.
Before Notre Dame was built, it was a Roman temple to Jupiter at that site, and it was the beating heart of Paris. So now I'm going to play some of where the announcers are referring to the master masons involved in the restoration.
Artisanship with international help as well from all around the world that dates back, they call them the companions of duty, that dates back to medieval times, passing tools and skills on from that. Bertrand, just a quick word from you about that, just looking at the artistry to get it back and the honouring the old traditions.
Yeah, you mentioned the companion, and the companionship is something that started with the building of the cathedral, as the Masons were starting to get organized, share their secrets, some say, or knowledge, other would say, and creating these guilds, and with the masters, the companion, the apprentice. And it's really astonishing to see that this has not disappeared. It never disappeared. So it's not like it was brought back to life. It's just the light was put back on it. And
It never disappeared. The light was just put back on it when they burned the cathedral down and then are rebuilding it. Companions of duty are the master masons and craftsmen, and it started with this building 800 years ago with the cathedral. Sharing secret knowledge, never disappeared, but the light was put back on it. Now I'm going to play some of a different video that I made about the architecture of cathedrals, because I think one of those secrets is that it replaces ball and tenant worship. This limestone stela was found in Carthage, a Phoenician Canaanite colony. It's located in the British Museum and dates 200 to 100 BC. It represents Baal worship. It depicts the goddess Tanit, their chief deity and mother goddess, who ruled over the sun, stars, and moon. Her name means Serpent Lady. What I noticed was the similarity between its design and the design of the classic Gothic cathedrals, and also the symbolism of Freemasonry, and also some symbolism of a wall decoration in a photo with Gloria Vanderbilt. I will attempt to show those connections in this video. A commenter said, "What's evident is the marriage between this iconography to Catholic symbols and to Balkan heritage," which is exactly what Gary Wayne writes about in his book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, which I'll be reading from. Carthage was a Phoenician Canaanite colony in northern Africa, founded around the 9th century BC. Canaanites were Phoenicians. According to Gary Wayne, quote, "The Canaanite kings considered themselves to be living gods, descending from the demigod offspring of El and perhaps Baal, as witnessed by the famous Phoenician king Hiram, who partnered with Solomon to build the temple in Jerusalem. Phoenician tomb inscriptions describe a lineage of kings who represented themselves as the earthly representatives of gods, or the Nephilim. Those two beliefs offer strong evidence that Nephilim were the kings of all Canaanite nations." So this Tanit was a version of Astarte brought from Phoenicia. So we have established that this is a Phoenician Canaanite artifact of worship. A sanctuary to Tanit in Baal Hamon was found with a children's cemetery called a Tophet, adjacent to where this artifact was found. And this is written about also in the Bible. There were many pots with children's remains found in the cemetery. The Carthage people and the Phoenicians had a reputation for the sacrifice of children. Tanit's worship was spread from Carthage to Spain, Malta, and Sardinia. Examples of Tanit's symbol have also been found in Sicily and in Rome on the north side of the Capitoline Hill. This was likely spread by the Phoenicians since they were seafarers. The Romans identified Tanit as their heavenly goddess or the heavenly virgin. So there's a possible Roman Catholic connection. This stela depicts Tanit flanked by snakes, some say, but they look like pillars or columns, and they also sort of look like an anchor to me if you shorten it. But at the top, above Tanit, is this 12-petaled rosette in a disc at the top of the triangle in the stela. And this 12-petaled rosette is probably the most significant defining feature, because that same rosette with 12 petals is the defining feature of most Gothic cathedrals. Notice the placement of the rose window in the cathedral between the triangular facade of the building, and also notice the pillars. It's the same placement as in the stela. And you also see the triangular top of what represents a temple in the stela. You also see the sun, moon, and stars. So the sun is on the left, the moon is on the right. Now, let's look at some classic examples of European Gothic cathedrals to find the similarities between them and this Phoenician stela. Almost all of them, especially the classic ones, have the one side that looks like this on the facade. The facade is often the most important part of the design, as it sets the tone for the rest of the building. So you'll see the 12-petal rose window is there between the facade, which is a triangle, and the two pillars on either side. And this one is in Yorkshire, England. The older cathedrals were built around 1200 AD roughly, and the classic ones almost always have this exact same facade or feature. And why is that? According to Gary Wayne, Gothic cathedral architecture and symbolism is inspired by Knights Templar knowledge and were built to transmit alchemical knowledge and therefore inundated with alchemical symbols. So could part of this alchemical knowledge include the same knowledge that was incorporated into the stelas of the Tanit dedicated to Baal by the Phoenician Canaanite worshippers in Carthage? Seeing as how it has the same rosette and the same number of petals in between the pillars with the triangular facade. I believe that stela to Tanit proves exactly what Gary Wayne wrote about in his book. So the Gothic cathedrals were supposedly Catholic, but they're Gnostic, Templar-funded, designed and built, and dedicated to Mary Magdalene, who Gnostics consider as their mother goddess. One of the first Gothic cathedrals was Aachen, which was commissioned by Charlemagne during 800 AD, and Charlemagne has links to the Merovingians. Gothic cathedrals are usually made of limestone, and so is the Canaanite stela. See, they're the same color. This is Amiens in France, a cutaway, so you can see the triangular shape at the top and the rose window between the two pillars. The rose windows have 12 petals, exactly like the one in the Tanit ball stela. Amiens. Another interesting thing about the north rosette window in Amiens is that there's a pentagram in the middle of it, right here. This is Chartres Cathedral in France, same architecture design, 12-petal rose window in between two pillars with the triangular facade at the top. One author, quoted by Gary Wayne, states that the Templars built Chartres to be a repository for ancient wisdom, equal to Stonehenge, the Temple of Solomon, and the Great Pyramid, noting that Chartres was an ancient holy site dedicated to the mother goddess, Isis, and that its altar was erected above a druid cave. Both Chartres and the Notre Dame cathedrals are believed to have been built on sacred ground where the telluric earth currents are at their highest levels. So is there any wonder why Gothic cathedrals are usually depicted in vampire movies? Now we can look at the connections to Freemasonry. Here you have the pentagram, just like the one in Amiens, although it's point up where the one in the rose window at Amiens is point down. But you have the sun on the left here, and the moon and stars on the right, and the pillars. Also featured on the Canaanite Phoenician stela dedicated to Baal. All right. Canaanite builder craftsmen were commissioned by the Phoenician king Hiram of Tyre to build the first Jerusalem temple, believing that they were blood descendants of Masonic craftsmen, and that was in 957 BC. If you still think that Notre Dame, which is French for Our Lady, refers to Mary, the mother of Jesus, and not Tanit, the snake goddess, and Isis, the mother goddess, and Mary Magdalene, or whatever else label they want to put on their mother goddess, then I don't know how many different ways to say the same thing, but I will show some other examples continuing in this video. The phoenix that was placed on top of the Notre Dame also has a reference to the Phoenicians. So, here is the same classic Baal Tanit reference in the south facade of the Notre Dame in Paris. Right here in the middle you see it. The spire that burned was replaced, and that is the one that is directly behind that facade. On the limestone stela to Baal Tanit, you also have the Omega symbol. You see it here on either side of this, what looks like a woman with her arms raised, the Omega symbol on the left and right. And then you have the triangle or the pyramid, which represents the Alpha. Now I'm going to play some of a video regarding this Alpha Omega, along with the X symbol, which I had not previously heard about until a couple days ago when Sister Natasha sent me a video about it that I'm going to play, and that has to be the Holy Spirit, because it is all over the book used by the Archbishop in the ritual of Notre Dame, which I'm also going to show. Okay? And it also has the all-seeing eye that we saw on the Antichrist figure in the iPet Goat video. I'm going to play some of this iPet goat video now. Actually, I'm not going to play any more of it, but notice the symbolism of the beast here, the Antichrist. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the video about the Alpha, Omega, and beast symbolism that Natasha sent me.
The most dangerous and most sinister organisation in the entire history of mankind is an organisation called Omada Aho. Now, an Armada is a team. So the same as you would have sorority groups in the universities in the USA, and they would use Greek letters to identify themselves, usually 3 Greek letters. This team does the same. They are called Team Aho. Aho means sorrow. That's Team Sorrow. Let's just take a look at who Team Sorrow are and the worldwide evidence that proves that they are the world's largest and most sinister conspiracy. This is the mark of the beast, the pyramid, the X and the disc. The disc is also known as the flying disc, the winged disc, the horn disc, the sun disc and a halo. Wherever you see these symbols, in whatever order you see them, or angle you view them from, these organisations, be they governmental or business, are connected directly to the Freemasons. And the Freemasons are a satanic cult which goes back to the days of Babylon, the mother of all prostitutes. They are a satanic trade union controlling the entire world and all of its trade and wars, etc. And this is their mark, the mark of the beast. And the mark of the beast is a logo, same as you see outside governmental buildings, businesses, etc. And you perceive the word logo to mean some pictures which have a representation to a company or organisation. That is as far as you get to understanding what it really means. The word logo is Greek. It means word. So when you are looking at a logo, you are looking at a word, and that word has a meaning. And the mark of the beast is a word, and it has a meaning. The meaning is deep and terrible sorrow, and the word is aho. Reading from bottom to top. Let me show you how. Almighty God said, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. The devil wants to be God and parodies everything that God does. The horn disc, also known as the winged disc, which is basically a flying saucer, and the pyramid, which is a flying saucer landing pad, are the devil's chosen tools to parody Alpha and Omega. The mark of the beast in its most basic format consists of 3 Greek letters, Alpha, Omega, and the letter He, which in English is pronounced X, but in the Greek language is pronounced as an H. The 3 basic letters of the mark of the beast spell the word Aho, which is Greek and means deep and terrible sorrow.
So I'm not sure if that is the mark of the beast, but it is definitely a mark of the beast. Notice the symbolism of the beast that he's referring to looks a lot like this bas relief. I hope you see that. Which, as I illustrated before, correlates to the Gothic architecture of the cathedrals, and that is one of the secrets. Natasha also pointed out that sorrow in this context could also refer to the Eye of Sauron. You kind of, when you see in that I Pet Goat video, that this guy kind of looks sorrowful, doesn't he? But you see on his forehead, it's the same representation of the Eye of Sauron and the pyramid, Alpha, Omega, beast symbolism that we just talked about. And he's standing right next to the Gothic cathedral burning in this I Pet Goat video. Shaking My Head Productions also did a video showing that same symbolism in the movie Stargate. I think he posted it yesterday. It's at the beginning, and it shows a symbol in that movie, the same symbolism here, and it's this female-looking one with the arms raised. That's the symbol in the movie Stargate that he showed. Same one at the top of the ball tenant relief with the arms raised. And if you need more proof, let's look at this part of the ritual as the organ is playing. You have this archbishop reading from a book which is supposed to be the French version of Psalm 121. And they go back and forth with the reading and the organ, which they refer to as the rebirth of this organ, which was also restored with the cathedral, and it's a pipe organ. Ezekiel describes the workmanship of pipes and timbrels that were prepared for a certain someone on the day they were created. Thou hast been in the garden of Eden, every precious stone was thy covering, the sardius, topaz, diamond, beryl, onyx, jasper, sapphire, emerald, and the carbuncle, and the gold, and the workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in thee in the day that thou wast created. So I'm going to play some of this video now of the organ and the reading of this book in the ritual in the Notre Dame Cathedral.
Universal song, and so this song that rises up to you, God, so that it can be worthy of your love, we ask you to consecrate this organ, to bless it, so that our hearts can sing to you in the Holy Spirit. In the name of Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Look at that book. That book has the Alpha, the X, and the Omega right there in the middle that he's holding up, that he's going to be reading from. And I'm going to show that a close-up of it later.
Éveille-toi, orgue, instrument sacré, entonne la louange de Dieu, notre Créateur et notre Père.
That is one creepy sounding organ. That does not sound holy. It sounds like a horror movie. It sounds like a vampire movie. I mean? So they just go back and forth reading from that book and playing the organ. I'm telling you, the world is run by satanic vampires. You can call me crazy if you want to, but I'm just going to keep giving proof. So that book, here you can see it a little better. The same book used in the ritual of knocking on the door with the shepherd's stick in this ritual. The stick is called the crozier, and they refer to the opening of the doors as portals. See, this guy's holding that same book, Alpha X Omega. Opening of portals, and he says that when they're knocking at the door, they're asking to be let in, like a dang vampire. And this is why the Gothic literature is about vampires and Frankenstein, etc. It's not a time period thing, as stated by the historians. It's an esoteric religious thing. Remember the vampire movies that are riddled with occult knowledge and the hints at vampires being bloodliners. They also include alchemy in the vampire movie theme. And now I'm going to go over other examples of the occult language used by the announcers in this ritual. They make a reference to alchemy in building cathedrals, and I think the person who states that is one of the announcers named Clovis. And they make it a point to note that Clovis is named after a Frankish or Merovingian king, Clovis. They also talk about the transition from darkness to light, and that France can achieve a great work. Macron said the cathedral speaks of transcendence, which is the meaning of the work. They also play bells that are blessed by Louis XIV, the Sun King, the Bourbon, the Plantagenet, the Anjou, the Golden Voyager. And I'll play some of that now.
You might be able to hear sound now of this is the largest bell. This is Emmanuel, perhaps aptly named, but this goes back to the days, I think, was blessed by the Sun King Louis XIV himself. It sounds in F sharp, I believe, as well, and is ringing tonight.
So it's the same bell that was blessed by Louis XIV, the Sun King. And when Macron spoke, he was only honoring the building and the former kings of France and Europe, including England, who would be the Franks, the Merovingians, the Plantagenets, the Anjou, Bourbon, who I've talked about a lot on this channel. Most recently in my video titled Plantagenets, and the Rex Deuce, or the Dragon Court, as Gary Wayne calls them, which would make a lot of sense why they put a phoenix to represent the dragon on the top of the spire. They also say there is a relic crown of thorns in the ceiling in one of the buttresses. They say that one of the thorns was acquired by Louis IX during the Crusades. He was a Bourbon. This is just an article about how Melania and Brigitte Macron went to see the thorn crowns in a museum on a previous visit. They talk a lot about gargoyles being restored, and they make an excuse for the gargoyles, saying that you have to be aware of the darkness, and that's why they're there, and that they were just water spouts to keep rain off the building. But then they say that when they were restoring them, they had to use a different material than water so they wouldn't be damaged. So they're liars, and liars can't keep up with their lies, and they're of their father, the devil. And speaking of vampires, back in 2019, when this Notre Dame burned, they unearthed lead coffins which were found beneath the spire. And who was it? It was a nobleman and a clergy. And one last thing. They mentioned that celebrities were also there at the reopening of the cathedral, but the one that they kept showing was Selma Hayek, the actress and now producer. Here she is at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in 1998 wearing a tiara. She was in a movie called The Tale of Tales, and this is her portrayed eating the heart of a dragon. She's also played as Ajak in the Eternals movie. But she also had a role as a vampire queen in the horror film From Dusk Till Dawn in 1996, in which she performed an erotic tabletop snake dance as what? The Serpent Lady. And after that is when she wore the tiara at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Remember that Tanit was the snake goddess, the Serpent Lady, and this is probably why they invited Selma Hayek to the reopening of their end-time religion Gothic cathedral, because she did such a great job of playing the vampire queen Tanit Serpent Lady in the movie. Thanks for listening.